Welcome to the TREvolution Collaboration Cafe. This is all about building collaborations for the DUK Research Exemplars funding call. So the idea being that we're going to have a couple of brief talks here this afternoon. The first one is going to be by Professor Jim Smith, giving an overview of the TREvolution project and our capabilities and what we expect to be available by the time that the exemplar projects are due to start. And following up from that, we'll have a brief talk from Dr. Chris Cole from University of Dundee, and he's going to cover the sort of types of projects that we are interested in for this particular funding call. We've got a lot to get to for the hour. So that's the two talks we're going to have. Project types, we'll have a brief 10-minute Q&A, and then we're going to have breakout rooms on different topics. We will have different people from TREvolution in those different breakout rooms, so they're available for discussion to discuss ideas for the projects and answer any questions around the funding call or TREvolution. And then we'll come back for a brief wrap up with just information on important deadlines that you need to have. Just to reiterate what I said at the very start, there is a Q&A, but there's also the chat. So you have questions, you can ask in Q&A in the breakout rooms, or you can ask questions in the chat. We do have people available to answer the questions. So at that point, I'm going to hand over to Professor Jim Smith to give an overview of TREvolution.
Hi, everyone. Cool. Yeah, I'm James Smith. I'm from UWE. I lead on the kind of disclosure control and AI parts within TREvolution. And I'm here to talk to you about the big picture today. So if I could have the next slide, please. These beautiful people, who some of you will have met before, are who TREvolution is. We came together out of the various driver projects that Dare did in phase one, recognizing that there is strength through doing stuff together, and that if we're building a big initiative, we're really interested in parts that fit together and work together. And the goal is what it says there. It's about bringing together relevant standards where they're existing, looking at how can we build trust in the things that TRE do and various things that trust might mean, and enabling federation. So I'm just going to go through those kind of adoptions, trust and federation bits in a bit more detail. If I can have the next slide, please. And we can go straight past there, I think. So there's loads of standards out there. What we don't want to do is to create entirely new standards to do that. So we're talking about using standards that already exists and driving those, building on international efforts wherever appropriate, rather than going off and building yet another load of new stuff that will or won't be of use in 5 years' time. So if we could move on to just talk through those. So some of the things we're talking about is, so there's this big international alliance called GA for GH, which has built some standards for assisting in federated analytics, especially something called the Task Execution Service, which is a standard way of sending batch analyses to be run. It's developed in there, but it's nothing specifically to do with genomics and health. It's when you can describe your workflow as a stream of stuff that you want to send somewhere and have run and come back, then TS is one way of doing that. We do recognize that's not the only thing that people would want to do in federated analytics. SARTA, I hope most people on this call are really aware of, though this is a thing that came out of one of the early day thing and is developed very much by the community. It's a standard way of being able to say, what's a TRE? How can TREs work together? How can you work out, decide, and be confident the people you're working with are doing and mean the same things as you when they talk about what a TRE is and what the different parts of the processes involved are. And of course, the FAIR standard, which lots of us will be approached, well, is how can you make sure that the work that's being done is genuinely of use to the scientific community, so it's findable, it can be interactive, your workflows can be reused, and all those things, lots of which glued together by metadata, data about how you did what you did. Now the next slide then, please. So As I mentioned briefly, Task Execution Service or TES, there will be a working version of this. This has already been in use by Sail for various ways of connecting together and sending tasks across a network of federated nodes. So we're interested in things like, well, can the analysis you want to do be run via TES? I'm told by the people at Sail that in many cases the answer to this is yes. We know not necessarily for all cases, but we're interested in what can be done, what can't be done, what other components would be needed to do out of what we're calling weaves, which is collection of software components we can bring together in different ways. Can existing federated platforms become compatible with TES? We know there's various platforms out there for federated analysis already. Can those be run over a TES enabled thing if that's the kind of some standard plumbing we want to provide to do things? So as I said, production ready of that will be available, be in use in Sail, and forms the basis of some of the weaves that we're talking about. Okay, next slide, please. So in one of the first phases, we took our standard version of saying, what would a SATA compliant TRE look like? And recognizing that there are many commercial offers, we said, well, what would a completely open source cloud agnostic version of that look like that people could download and compare against what they've got with all this support built in? And version 1 of that will be released and is going to be available for adoption in what's an astonishing piece of work given the amount of time available to them. But they built this. It's amazing that they've done it in this time. So what we're really interested in now is that testing and deployment bit for a project, providing feedback. Did it work? What bits worked? What didn't? Bits may not have worked quite how people expected them to do. And really, how can we build on this? How can we build on this stack and make everything compliant and build it forward for the benefit of the community? So that's one of the other standards, and that's uses cloud standard stuff like Kubernetes based solutions and should work on all sorts of different platforms. Next slide, please. And then adopting fair metadata. So there will be a whole lot of things produced like a TREvolution knowledge graph visualization with a dashboard. So that's will be able to distribute. So when you've done a processor with some analytics and maybe you've got some disclosure control work, the idea is that there'll be a dashboard which lets you visualize all the metadata, which is describing exactly what did you do across what places with what data, what types of analysis you do, and what's the disclosure risking and stuff involved in that, all within standard metadata formats. So it's that kind of giving people that full overview of what happened for auditability, but in a way that is designed to help people say, what is it we've got to produce without producing masses and masses of external sort of extraneous metadata. So it's about transparency, it's about trust, it's about reusability and helping you along that process, along that journey towards making all your research projects like that. Next slide, please. So big emphasis on building trust. Okay, so again, SATA comes to the fore here. SATA is that key thing of saying, if you're going to do a federated project, how can you trust that this other TRE that you may or may not know well, that they're doing the same things, they've got all the relevant processes. How can your data owners, have confidence that's going on? Well, this is what SATA provides, and there'll be new components being added in version 2 to support federation, to allow that complex reasonable right down to machine readable statements about what's going on. This is also, we're talking about working with sensitive data. So we need to have trust that the public are comfortable with what we're doing. So we have got a lot of PIE embedded through our program. We're working very hard throughout everything that we do to make sure that the public are engaged and comfortable with all the things that we're providing, and that people can have confidence that that's happening. And we're going to need trust in the sense of how we what's the auditing thing? And RO creates is a way of packaging up all this metadata as a strong audit tool, so that people can see what happened, and we can publish it in a way that is open science in the sense of being fair and accessible about what's happened without obviously giving the details of the exact data that it was on. So that's the RO. Great bit towards building trust. And if we could have the next slide, please. There's just some details here of the level of PIE we've done. Really, really significant amounts. It's hugely important as much as anything, because the public are obviously incredibly valuable in challenging the things we say during these meetings and making sure that we're explaining things in open facing way. Quite a few people in the public advisory group. We've had a number of collaboration cafes. So I think the one we had on the disclosure control work, we had over 100 people there. Roughly, I think it was between half and a third and a half of them were public members, which was absolutely fantastic. Working with charities, organisations to do a whole load of outreach, trying to reach audiences who might otherwise be hard to get at or might engage less with this work. So the idea is we want people to be able to have trust in the things that we've done, that these are going to be accessible to the public because it's their data. Next slide, please. So one of the things that will be available is an updated RO crate. So RO stands for Research Object, and a crate that I always like to think of this as being the moving crates you have whenever you need to move your stuff from one place to another around the office or whatever. So it's a way of packaging up all the metadata that we needed in a 5 safes aware way, and with a load of tools that help validate that this has been correctly built and everything like that. So it's all interoperable with stuff within Federated, and also in a way that's interoperable with external major initiatives like the EOS, European Open Science Collaboration in Trust projects and things like that. So there's a standard framework for wrapping stuff up with tools to let you do this in the easiest way possible. That's slightly different. So accelerating research is the last part of this and the tools we're doing. So in terms of statistical disclosure control, the Sacro version will come with, there's a lot more work going on documentation and usability, new sites going live for versions of that. There'll be a research facing app to break down some of those boundaries. So we're doing loads of work between now and March around thinking what are the things that stop people adopting it and addressing those. There will be an aggregator, so that people want to do distributed analysis type Federation projects where they're collating results from a load of different TREs. An aggregator to do that, built so that with a load of options for TREs to specify different risk appetite, and again with full auditability in a internet standard language called data privacy vocabulary, saying exactly what checks have been run, why, and against what risk appetites, so that that can be compared to your manual processes as well to make sure everything's compliant. In terms of support for machine learning, Sacro ML is a tooling which provides capability to support projects where you're training ML on sensitive data. And there's a mixture of things we're developing. There'll be training resources for onboarding researchers and output checkers and data owners to be comfortable, and the project access boards and people like that who need to make decisions about whether this is going to happen. And this is accompanied by a load of documents about process. So there's something where we are just put on Zenodo, a framework called Release AI, which takes you through all the stages you need to do in addition to your standard operational processes for working with AI projects, because we know that this is the things that TREs have said they're not quite sure about what they need to, who needs to do what when. There's frameworks around that. There's tooling for running a load of automated attacks for risk assessing trained models. Again, with full auditing trails as standard they'll be written out in DPV and savable in JSON that can be wrapped up in an RO crate. So we've got that record of what's going on. And I think at this stage, I'm handing over to Chris.
Hello, hi everyone. Thanks, Jim, for that brilliant overview. So I'll very briefly give you some ideas of what an ideal, in inverted commas, project. There's no such thing really, but I think these are more kind of discussion points for the breakout room as a starting point for you to either engage or even attack and saying, well, that's a really bad idea. It's not going to work for this, whatever. And I think, that's what we kind of want to hear and want to see in these proposals as to, what things that can work and what is it that what areas need to be improved in this space. So next slide, please. So as part of TREvolution, we are inviting all partners, all researchers, um, to partner with TREs to test and evaluate one or more of these following capabilities that have been introduced through the TREvolution program, which Jim is highlighted. And I guess the biggest aspect and the newest aspect is the concept of federation and how that's being implemented. And that can be viewed in two ways. So data federation in that where you join this group of TREs or this group of researchers in a particular project, and data is more easily available to individual members of the team, regardless of where the data formally sits. Um, so that's kind of the basal layer. And then the next layer on top of that is not only do you have access to the data, but you potentially have the ability to send a particular script or a particular analytical framework to the various data sets available to you within that federation. And then and then potentially aggregate the results or return the results from those individual data sets. And that's all managed and orchestrated within the federation through the tooling that's developed in TREvolution. And then, as Jim explained around output disclosure, that's one of the challenges of a federation is when things move in and out of a TRE, that's when decision points need to be made. And so that's where the Sacro tool comes in to help semi-automate or even fully automate those disclosure checks within the process or the project of that federation. And that can include, AI or ML type projects. So I've prepared some schematics just, I guess, to avoid the wall of text and to try and maybe draw a picture of what these things might look like. And feel free to either use those or um, as an entry point for the discussions in the breakout rooms. So next slide, please. And I'll go over these pretty quickly. So you have a series of TREs here. So there are two of them which are Sartre compatible or Sartre compliant, and they have their own governance and data and compute within them. And then they are now part of this a federation where you can work through your project with the data in those two environments. And any federation is kind of loose. It's fairly manual, and it's done by people checking things as they go in and out of the TREs in the federation. And not all TREs are available to do that, and so you need to pick and choose which ones are suitable for your project and also suitable for the federation. So next slide. And then we can expand this a little bit more where you take out some of the manual aspects and you add in the Sacro elements to aid the analyses and the swiftness of doing the work across multiple TREs. Next slide. Or you might not be so interested in a federation as such, but you want to work, or you would normally work with a TRE that's local to you and familiar to you, but they aren't necessarily Sartre compliant. So you want to, as part of this work, because it's a really rich and useful data set that could be of use to the wider community in the UK, is to work with the TRE and work with us to make them or to help them align themselves with Sartre or even understand what that even means. So then going forward in future, then that makes life easier for either including or being involved in more and larger projects. Next one. And then this one is where you have an existing TRE or you want to have a new TRE that is built upon the advances that we're developing in TREvolution and using the Cater open source and standards compliant version of a TRE. And so with your local TRE or a completely new TRE, you can develop this new infrastructure that is portable and scalable and all those aspects within kind of a TREvolution framework, which may or may not be part of a federation. Next one. And then this is kind of like the all singing, all dancing, everything switched on to the max. So you've got a whole bunch of TREs with a variety of data, and you want to do a federated. Oh, one of my AI heads has disappeared. You want to federate a federated analytics project, and all the disclosure control is managed through the SacroML tool sets in your data set, and your TREs may or may not be using the Cater TRE, but they all fit in within the federation framework that you want. And last example is basically anything else. These are just a starting point. You might have a really novel and interesting way of looking at this, so that doesn't mean it's not suitable for this call. I think the aim is around existing or new data sets that are of interest to try and work with in the sensitive space, and enable TREs to work better with that type of data and researchers to work better with that data. And so that's it. Over to you, thinking about what is it that you can think of you could do with the things that, and we can work together to try and mature this TRE space in the UK. So next slide. So we have a few minutes now, I think, for some immediate Q&A, and then we'll break out to various breakout rooms and then do more detailed discussions.